AI make MMA safer for fighters and ultimately help rewrite the rules when it comes to brain injury in sports? Welcome to Mind Matters, navigating head injuries and concussions. I'm your host, Kiley Como. I'm the legal nurse consultant here at Shane Smith Law, and today we're joined by Chris Cannon, General Manager of M2MMA, a combat sports league that's not just revolutionizing how we watch MMA, but also how we protect athletes from traumatic brain injury. We're going to unpack the roots of M2MMA, Chris's personal journey from professional golf to pioneering brain health in the cage, and how innovation can make sports safer for everyone. Chris, good to have you on the show today, man.
Kylie, pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Let's dive in. I know our listeners are going to enjoy this conversation. So, Chris, for those that are new to the sport, combat sports, what is M2MMA and what makes it different from other combat sports organizations?
Well, M2MMA is a combat sports organization. On the front end, we hold fantastic world-class promotions. We held 2 last year in Thailand. The real focus of our mission is to develop improved protocols around safety, specifically traumatic brain injury in combat sports. We believe the way to do that is to develop innovative AI technologies to collect real-time data so we can actually start to properly understand what is happening to an athlete when they're competing and taking strikes to the head, and then start to develop improved protocols to protect the athletes and ultimately support them over the long term as well.
That's excellent. Now, I know you were a professional golfer, is that correct?
That is correct, and it's obviously one of the questions I get asked most. How did a professional golfer end up running a combat sports league? Well, 2 reasons. Number one, I've just been a sports fan my whole life, and especially combat sports. You know, growing up in the UK in the 90s, boxing was massive. Obviously, we had the era of Mike Tyson, a couple of our British boys fought Tyson, Frank Bruno, Lennox Lewis. And then moving into the 2000s, I actually moved to America on a golf scholarship to Wake Forest in North Carolina, which I know is not far from where you are there.
Demon Deacons.
During that time was obviously the kind of heyday of Floyd Mayweather, and the UFC was really kicking off as well. So I got big time into MMA also. So it's always been a huge passion of mine, but obviously following on from my background of competing in professional golf for 14 years, supporting athletes is very close to my heart. I might not understand what it's like to compete in a ring or in a cage, although I have trained throughout my life. But I understand what the journey is like for an athlete to pursue their dream and the trials and tribulations that come along with that, and especially in these sports where I believe these athletes are very underserved and ultimately underprotected as well.
That's excellent. Yeah, I can see the crossover for sure. Just especially your advocacy, your passion to support athletes in taking their game to the next level. So you're in golf. You go from collegiate golf to professional golf. Were there any moments in that trajectory in your athletic career where you witnessed or maybe even experienced the impact of brain injury firsthand? Again, whether in yourself or maybe a colleague, and how did that influence your drive, to change the sport?
Well, I can't say I personally ever did. I certainly always had a real passion for the psychological side of sports, right? Because again, if I were to look at all the greatest athletes throughout history, even if let's say take Floyd Mayweather for example, if I watch that man boxing in a ring and the way he keeps his eyes wide open, doesn't matter what's being thrown at him, and how clearly he is able to pick apart a fighter, that to me says how crucially the brain plays an impact in performance, especially. Then obviously throughout time we've had, the terrible tragedies within the ring. We had Michael Watson in the UK against Chris Eubank back in the day. And, for me, and obviously seeing what was going on, starting to hear what was carrying on in NFL and, rugby as well was a passion of mine growing up. There's always something I could see was happening. And again, especially following boxing and following MMA, but I didn't really know, I'll be completely honest, what the depth of the issue was until actually taking this role on and getting further behind these sports and actually really delving into the issue itself. And it's only, again, really increased my passion for actually addressing this issue. Because again, yes, I have a real passion for supporting athletes holistically and everything that they do. But specifically around this is something that must be addressed and something we must do better as a sports organization.
Absolutely. When you look at the risks that are facing these athletes as you're kind of assessing the landscape in combat sports, as you're pivoting to the MMA world, particularly when we're talking about brain injury, what stood out to you as the area that most needed change right away?
Well, for me, it's around sparring. I mean, obviously the fight is the fight. It's the big showcase. I mean, again, I love watching combat sports. Have done my whole life, and there's nothing quite like watching two men or women go toe to toe in what is like the essential of like combat and sports and the nature of human beings. You know, facing off in that environment. And, you know, obviously every now and again we've had these terrible injuries happen in the ring. Obviously recently this year in Japan we had 2 athletes die after a boxing fight, you know, both suffering brain bleeds. But the question is, for me, having delved more into these sports, is, you know, seeing these guys and girls spar twice a week pretty much uniformly throughout, whether it be MMA, boxing, Muay Thai. But there's absolutely no data being collected. There seems to be no kind of protocol in place. No real understanding of what is the right amount of sparring that needs to take place. And yet, as we know from obviously studies now in CTE, and it's the amount of impacts to the brain is actually really causing the damage over a long period of time and potentially putting an athlete in greater danger of receiving a concussion during an actual fight. So for me, it's sparring, and how can we develop technologies to better understand what is the right amount of sparring? How can we understand when an athlete should be drawing back from the amount of sparring, or indeed from a cognitive performance? You know, what again? It's just the lack of kind of information that these athletes have. And when I look at other sports, again, obviously my background in golf, you know, for 15 years ago, I was being hooked up to various monitors, force plates, 3D modeling, like, you know, things on my brain, etc. You know, trying to find data, every little point to improve, you know, just a golf swing. So if I look at combat sports, when so much is on the line, I just think there's so much opportunity here to integrate technology, especially when it comes to this issue of sparring. And I'm sure every athlete is going to be different, and that's why it's also important to get that data. Because, you know, between you and I, we may be at a different level of how many impacts we've taken over time and where our brain is at. Even things that, you know, now we're starting to learn how your neck strength is, your diet, nutrition, the sleep, all these different mitigating factors. So, yes, the fight is a big part of it, and you said we want to collect real-time data analytics in that fight to be able to, you know, be able to understand on the sidelines. But again, it's the day-to-day training, it's the sparring twice a week over a training camp, over an athlete's career, where I think the biggest gain can be made.
Yeah, I agree. There's so much work that's been done with the lead up to the event. No matter what the sport is, you see it, you know, in running and golf and everything else. You know, it's not go hard all day, every day up to you've got to really pace yourself. You mentioned nutrition, you mentioned, you know, of course, the physical training, the cardio, all of that has to be very measured and very specifically dosed, if you will, at particular times. I love that you brought that up. I'd like to ask our audience a question. You know, we've got a lot of folks who have experienced brain injury, love people who have brain injuries, providers, you know, whether as a patient, family member, or that provider. Send us your question, a question you'd like to ask Chris on how technology might help in prevention of TBI. Chris, I know, you know, your company M2MMA that you're part of, you know, is all about tech and improving brain injury prevention. Have you seen any other medicines or tech gear that's come out in the last few years that's given you a lot of hope in that realm of TBI prevention or management?
I think the NFL specifically, you know, we've had the movie like Concussion, right, where I think people have started to address this issue. Obviously, we had the lawsuit, you know, recently as well, where people have realized this is an issue that needs to be addressed. It can't just be something we continually sweep under the rug and accept it as a part of sports, that we can do better at. So there are some, you know, companies in this space, you know, the last few years, again, who you're looking around. For example, in rugby, we have the Prevent Biometrics mouth guard that measure head impacts. We have, you know, other technologies that are working on, you know, we've spoken to people who have, like, you know, handheld brain scanners to protect, you know, to pick up brain bleeds, which might be useful within a protocol. Also, even just cognitive monitoring. You know, we've spoken to a company called NeuroCatch recently, who they have a device, so basically a portable EEG monitor, where an athlete can potentially monitor their cognitive performance. Now, this could be something that over time could allow us to correlate data to see trends where an athlete's cognitive performance might match up to strikes taken to the head, and start to develop an understanding again what is happening. You know, I know some people are also working developing supplements specifically to, you know, on the solution side of things and the treatment side of things as well. We have photobiomodulation again, which have also shown some interesting we spoke in a company called Vaylite to have got some great studies out of BYU University on showing, again, how their technology is assisting athletes who suffer, taking hits to the head throughout training camps, etc. So it is very positive to see that people are starting to look at addressing this issue. And again, for us, that's why it's great to do, interviews like this, because this is not something that one company is going to fix with one magic swipe of the wand, the switch of the wand, so to speak. It requires a collaborative solution of people working together to actually protect athletes and make these sports safer, where we can still enjoy them. I love to play rugby. I love to train combat sports. I love to watch them. I don't want to necessarily change these sports, but there's no doubt there's so much we can do around them in terms of how we protect our athletes to, make them safer.
100%. I can hear the passion in your voice, and you certainly bring a lot of salient points. With M2MMA specifically, your mission talks a lot about confronting the biggest challenge in sports, right? Like brain injury, athlete well-being, you've spoken a lot of already. What does that mission look like in practice for you guys?
So for us, the key, number one, let's say from a safety protocol standpoint, we've recently conducted a review into that and about how can we develop, with existing what we have right here and now, what can we improve as a protocol? And even just uniforming the protocols. If you look at combat sports specifically, one of the difficulties is the nature of these sports and the way they're currently organized and regulated. In boxing, you have multiple different sanctioning bodies. In MMA, you have the federations for each country, but they have, in some places, very little say, and it's really up to the promotion itself. So they're very disorganized and disjointed. So for us, one of the issues we want to address is creating a uniform protocol that sets out the standard which all of combat sports can follow. Even some of these medical guideline books are long, but they don't even contain the most updated concussion detection in terms of just the SCAT-6, right? They're still using SCAT-3 or SCAT-5. Some don't even include the SCAT test. So that protocol, uniforming it with what we currently have existing today is a key part of this. Number two, for us, is about, again, developing these AI technologies for us to collect data in real time, to then use AI to be able to correlate the data, as I said earlier, to start to understand where an athlete is at in terms of their brain health. Because we believe, again, obviously we're very fortunate now in this day and age, AI is available and it's doing incredible things across society. So we should be using this in sports. Right, and again, we've seen bits of it recently within the entertainment factor, and yes, that is part of it, because obviously if you are collecting real-time data, you can provide the fans with a more enriched experience. But again, this incredible tool we have available to us that can provide all these calculations instantaneously almost, should be able to, if we have the right data points, collecting from it might be a mouth guard, high resolution cameras, sound, impact from the equipment itself with technology integrated into it as well. Correlating these various different data points, how it's affecting an athlete's biomarkers, heart rate, temperature, blood pressure, oxygen saturation. Then over time, let's say if we are monitoring athletes, obviously this extensively is going to be done throughout training camps, we can start to understand what is really happening to an athlete. Now we have a profile for Kiley, and we can see how over time it's starting to change, and where we want to be is where we can provide a percentage range of is that athlete at risk of receiving a TBI, and how we can adjust their training protocol around that. And potentially in the end, at the moment which we have the situation where people throw a towel in, right? We must be able to do better than that in this stage. And I think in combat sports specifically compared to other sports, they are a long way behind in terms of technology integration.
Yeah, I like your mention of throwing the towel in. I mean, so much of that is so subjective on what 100%. You're seeing the athlete look like, right? But these athletes are trained to look strong, to even feign strength when they're weak, and that obviously is not going to work for that situation.
Again, that's a really good point you've made there, right? Is that the nature of the sports themselves dictates that you are going to hit people in the head and you're going to be hit in the head.
Yeah.
And it is a big thing about that mentality. And I don't want to take that away, because that's part of what makes the sports we love so great.
Yeah.
But again, from the sidelines point of view, in terms of where it's currently managed, of a referee basically trying to monitor how an athlete's looking while also watching out for the rules during a fight, or the trainer on the sideline. And again, we can do so much better here. You know, even technology these days that can start to analyze an individual's gait and changes in gait, right? That can be integrated. Again, there's a lot of potential here, but ultimately one of the issues there hasn't been, and I understand it, a lot of these fight promotions, they have their big business and they're being very successful and it is what it is. And they say, I'm a fan of it and but for us, it is the number one goal. And that's why our promotion as a sporting side of things will be built around improving these protocols and integrating these technologies.
I mean, everything you're saying resonates with me. It sounds so common sense, but I'm going to ask you, I can't imagine it would happen, but have you received any resistance from within the sport?
As of yet, no. Because again, like athletes, look, the question I get asked the most is like, come the day where the technology is, running and the various different data points being collected and this issue around stopping fights, and I get that. And again, that's something where we will need to coordinate with, experienced professionals within this industry to find where is that line and develop those protocols over time. I think one of the resistance we've heard from other sports, for example, speaking to other companies, for example, in NFL, one anecdote I heard was that, because the players, well, actually this does lead on to combat sports, and I'll go into that now, that because the players, if they get put on injury reserve, they don't get paid, right? So they're also cautious about being pulled out for overly, technical regulations around head injuries. Yeah. Owners don't want to have to sign more athletes. In combat sports, one of the issues specifically we have is that fighters currently get paid on a per fight basis, right? So now we're moving into the systemic issue of the sport, where athletes in the whole are not paid enough, and the resistance, what you mentioned there, is athletes will do anything to get in that ring to get paid.
Yeah.
So again, we have to think about, it's not just the technology side of things, how do we actually change the structures of how the sports are run? And again, this is a long-term process and it won't happen overnight, because again, if you are now going to pull out an athlete 5 days before the fight and they desperately need that money, but technology has shown that they are at too high of a risk of receiving a TBI in that fight, we need to compensate them for that. And that is how we will start to change athletes' mentality, that actually during training camps, if they are starting to feel some of the signs or symptoms of concussion, they report it. Because right now they're not incentivized to do so, because especially when you move outside of the top level, the UFC or your matchroom boxing or the top rank or whatever it is, these guys and girls are literally fighting week to week. And again, I don't understand that from a fighting standpoint, but my professional golf career didn't quite turn out the way I wanted it to be. And I understand the situation of every single week you're going out there to try and make money to survive the next week, right? Right. So again, as an organization, we also have to address the systemic structures behind the sport, so where athletes are not incentivized not to report their symptoms. Yeah,
I could see that being. I mean, I'm not in that fighting sports arena either, but I could see, especially those young or upcoming fighters that are trying to build a brand and name, get to the big fights. You're taking everything you can as often as you can. So I imagine
100%.
I mean, I think you're talking about a culture shift, and that sounds like turning an aircraft carrier. I mean, $1 billion business. It's got to start at the bottom,
And you're exactly right, and we have the ability, because we are new and we are flexible, right? That we can innovate. We have a lot more, like say, room to innovate than, let's say, a UFC, because we are starting from the bottom, and we are small and we are nimble and we can work with different people and we can design our protocols around how we want our promotion to build over time. But again, even in the gyms, like, you're talking about it is a shift in mindset. Recently I was in the UAE, again, this is where our company is based, and, visiting the UAE MMA Federation, the gym there, and again, they were incredibly, receptive to our ideas and loved everything we talked about. Same with the UAE Boxing Federation, because they have that, let's say, innovative mindset where they want to do something new, something change. But obviously you've got the old school guard. And look, I saw this in golf as well, and I was probably, guilty of this, of not, let's say, using as enough technology as I should have done, because I always felt, most people and athletes and coaches, they think experience trumps technology for the most part. So you're also trying to change attitudes within gyms and training, but the only way to do that is to actually, like anything in science or any new technology, is to prove it.
Yes.
So again, we want to work with people like starting off small and start to prove our concept that this is actually the way to move forward, not just from a safety point of view, but again, if we're talking about, if you look at other sports and training protocols, or not be it strength and conditioning or running or whatever sport it is, those training protocols are very specific to find the absolute 1% of an athlete's top performance, okay? So again, the same with sparring. We might find that actually athletes sparring 50 or 30% less might actually be where they reach a fight at their pinnacle performance. So if we can prove that to athletes, that actually not only is this helping protect your brain health, it's actually improving your performance, I think that's when we'll start to see the gradual shift and the change of the tide.
I could see that making a lot of sense to a fighter if you can show them the data, right? Data is gold, man. Yeah, and I think on top of that, right, then you're talking longevity. I mean, if you can avoid those TBIs, because the brain is like a finite bucket. You only have a certain amount of punches, so to speak, that you can take before that thing overflows and you're done. So yeah, to minimize that and elongate that time frame, I mean, that's more money. So what fighter wouldn't be like, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea.
And again, you're also speaking to another issue of education here. Right?
Yes.
Because again, like this is another big part of what we're looking to do is, and again, why I appreciate time on this call again today is because education is key. If again, a lot of athletes aren't aware of some of these things because, and I get it, like you maybe don't even want to know about it. But again, if you can frame it in the right context, that this is about actually, as you said, improving your performance, you're going to win more fights, your career is going to be longer, and you'll make more money. Then actually this is where the change needs to take place. But it's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to require like a collaborative effort. And we are, as I hope you can understand, I'm very passionate about this. Jeff Robinson, our CEO, we've got an incredible advisory board filled with Olympic silver medalist, world triathlon champion multiple times, and guys who are also equally motivated to address this issue. So yeah, we're working hard to do so.
I can tell. This conversation has been amazing. I know we're right up against time. I'd like to ask our audience, if you could drop it in the comments, as far as the AI tech that Chris has kind of explained to us, he's kind of scratched the surface. We're going to get into more of that in the next episode. But are there any questions you would like to ask him about that? Leave those in the comments below. Chris, last thing I want to do for this episode is I want you to speak to, families, survivors in the audience. What do you say to people worried about their loved ones getting involved in combat sports? I have sons that played football. We had concerns, my wife and I. What would you say to those families as we're going into this kind of new era of combat sports, given the risks?
It's a good question, and if you talk about family as well, I think that's one of the things that also not discussed enough is actually what about the family members who are supporting these individuals competing? I think ultimately these sports can provide so much good for so many people. If you look at the positive effect that combat sports has had on so many athletes, recently, I watched that documentary of Terence Crawford versus Canelo and how it changed Crawford's life.
That was great.
So, and my brother-in-law manages Anthony Joshua ever since he's come out of the Olympics, and it changed Anthony's life. So number one, get your kids in combat sports. And again, these are the most humble people I've met, especially comparative to golfers. This is why I love being in the gyms. They're just great people. It's a great atmosphere. You work hard. It teaches teamwork and working with the people. It teaches resilience. It teaches so many good things. But just be aware of your education around brain injuries, right? If you are aware of that, you can help protect yourself. If you are starting to feel some of the symptoms of concussion, pull back from sparring. What can you do around your sleep? What can you do around your nutrition? What can you do around the rest of your health to assist yourself if you're going to compete? Because again, they are such great sports, and you can learn so many good things. And the top level, you can earn great money and you can have a great career. And if you love it, it's going to make you happy. But just educate yourself, and again, speak to people like us, and obviously people like yourselves as well, and put yourself in the best possible position to have a great career and have a great time competing in combat sports.
That's a fantastic answer and good way to wrap up the show, Chris. Can't wait to talk to you again for our next episode. Everyone, that is going to do it for this episode of Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. A huge thank you to Chris Cannon from M2MMA for joining us today. For round two, we're going to dig deeper into the practical side of how fans and survivors and professionals can get involved and how lessons from the cage could change the way brain injury care is taken worldwide. Audience, please leave your comments about today's show below and add your own thoughts and experiences with us. The wisdom you shared might be what helps somebody get the help they need. Please subscribe to our channel, give us a like, and share the show with someone you love. And as always, remember, if you're in pain, call Shane at 980-999-9999. Take care.
In pain, so I call Shane. 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.